Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, I have family law attorney Cheryl Y. Mallis, owner of Mallis Law PC, calling in all the way from Garden City in good old New York. Now, Cheryl, who has a wealth of experience in the area of family law, will be talking to you today about a very interesting topic. You see, Cheryl's taken some time out of her busy day to come and talk about planning for divorce, exploring options, and avoiding pitfalls. So, if you are one of the many people seeking counsel in the Garden City, New York area, and you feel that you can relate to today's topic, you might want to down tools. Come on, log out of Facebook, give Twitter a break, log out of Instagram or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction. Grab yourself a notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes as we listen in to what Cheryl has to share with us today. So, with that said, welcome to the show, Cheryl.
Thank you very much.
You are so welcome, my dear. So let's just jump feet first in. Briefly, in your own words, then, Cheryl, describe the kinds of people who you help and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your assistance.
Well, usually the people that come to me are very distressed and unhappy people. They're either unhappy in their marriage, or they all of a sudden were served for papers for divorce when they didn't expect that their spouse was that unhappy or that was going to file for divorce. A lot of them are depressed. Oftentimes, they're very scared because their whole life is going to change. They know that their living arrangements are going to change, their access to their children are going to change, their finances are going to change, and people are very nervous.
So with that said then, Cheryl, before we go any further, it must be said that anything you share with us from this point on is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of sharing information. Can we both agree on that today then, Cheryl?
Yes, that is true.
That's so true. So with that said, when you think about those people that you just described who come to you for your help, what's the most common misconception you come across while you're out there working with those people?
Well, what happens is a lot of the spouses, and it could be men or women, who feel betrayed because their spouse has betrayed them in having an affair or a multitude of other things. Those people are so angry and so betrayed that they really want to punish the other party and feel that they need their day in court because they want to tell their story. They all have seen TV and movies, and they see people sitting on the witness stand and telling their story, and they feel that the judge is going to punish that other person.
Right.
And that's very common. And in actuality, none of that has very much to do with actually divorce. Divorce has to do with money and children. And neither of those has a lot to do with punishing the spouse. You know, unless, of course, there are real issues that happened with the children, then, of course, that's a separate issue by itself, that perhaps somebody does need punishing because of that. But on the basic of having an affair, a court is not going to care necessarily about that. That's not doesn't play into effect, especially here in New York.
So based on what you just shared with us then, Cheryl, and obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, please share an example of how you've helped someone or even how you would go about helping somebody who came to you with those challenges, that misconception you just described, and what kind of transformational results you were able to or would be able to gain for them.
Well, the big issue is that you need to try to convince. Of course, it depends which side of the case you're on. Are you on the angry spouse who was betrayed or on the other spouse who may or may not be guilty or feel guilty or things like that? But you want to discuss with these people that since the court and a stranger sitting in a black robe who does not know your family, which they will say themselves during some of the conferences, you don't want them making decisions for you. You want to make your own decisions. You want to be able to resolve this matter. And so you don't want to go to court. Court is going to end up costing a lot of money. It's going to take the schedule of your divorce out of your hands. It's going to take the conclusion, the final settlement, the final payments and negotiations out of your hand, again, because you're giving it to a stranger in a black robe. So what I try to do is I try to resolve it. I try to have clients understand what their options would be, what they may end up receiving if we ended up going to court, and the cost of getting there may be more than a party would be getting or a party would be giving. So, in other words, people don't realize that very often at the beginning of a case, the moneyed spouse, be it male or female, may make a proposal to try to settle the case. Because in their mind, they realize that if they're the moneyed spouse, they're going to have to pay a certain amount of money to the other spouse for dividing your assets, for support. And probably they will have to pay a certain amount of counsel fees for the spouse who doesn't have the money and for their own. So they realize that this is it. The longer the case goes on, not only does the offer usually decrease because it's costing that person more money, but also the wear and tear on the family becomes terrible. The children are involved longer in the arrangement. There's more anger and hostility that goes on, which does affect the children and the people. And they're much better off to try to resolve the matter. Now, just so everyone is clear, there are a lot of different options for when you decide to get divorced. Of course, you can go the way to court and litigation. You know, you have both hire attorneys and you go to court and you are on their schedule and motions may be filed if things are needed, and eventually either you'll settle at the end or have a trial, which can take years and years. There's also mediation, where both parties will come to a resolution themselves and go to one attorney to discuss it with them, and that attorney will draw up an agreement. And then each party should then consult with an attorney to review the agreement just to make sure that it is fair to both of them. And then there's something called collaborative law. Collaborative law is it's fairly new. And what that is there are specially trained attorneys that a husband and a wife both hire, their own. So you're each represented, but their goal is to keep the case out of court and to resolve it. And what happens there is actually an agreement that's signed that the people agree and the attorneys agree that if the case turns bad and has to go to court, the attorneys will no longer represent those people, and the people will then have to start all over and find new attorneys. Now, what this does is this actually keeps everyone at the table. It will help the people understand they don't want to start over again. They've just wasted all of this time and money and energy with these two attorneys. They don't want to start over. And it'll also keep the attorneys at the table because you're not going to have puffing. And the attorneys are not going to say, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to court tomorrow, because they can't in that case. They would lose the case. And with that, people work together. And when you're working together in an amicable way, it's better for everybody. And the parties then make the agreement the way they want it together. And you learn to respect.
Thank you for sharing that, Cheryl. Just before I move on, we do attempt here at Impact Makers Radio to break down the barrier between our listeners and professionals like yourself. So I'm talking about the communication barrier. Now, you used a phrase, I think it was the moneyed spouse. Could you just break that down so in layman's terms so that our listeners are absolutely clear what's meant by the moneyed spouse?
No problem. When I refer to the moneyed spouse, it's a term of art that's used in the legal system, and it means the spouse who is the bigger earner, who has more income. We can't call it the man, and we can't call it the husband, and we can't call it the wife or the woman, because it changes. So the moneyed spouse is just a generic name now. So as an example, if spouse A was earning $100,000 and spouse B was a stay-at-home parent, then the one A would be the moneyed spouse.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for making that clear, Cheryl. So, as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is family law attorney Cheryl Y. Mallis, owner of Mallis Law PC in Garden City, New York. And she's here to talk about planning for divorce, exploring options, and avoiding pitfalls. Now, that's actually a good segue into my next question. With that in mind, and for those people who are listening right now, Cheryl, what's the most common but unknown pitfall that they need to avoid, regardless of what situations they find themselves in?
As I had said earlier, I think the biggest pitfall they could find is you need to put the anger away. Mm. Anger plays a dangerous position in divorce. I understand that people are angry. You've gotten married, you've loved each other, and one of them is going to be angry that it didn't, one or both are going to be angry that it didn't turn out the fairy tale romance that everybody thought it was going to, and you're angry and you're upset. But anger, you have to put anger away and start thinking with your head and not your heart.
Okay, Cheryl, how many years have you been a practicing family law attorney? Don't go into your background yet, because I'm going to ask you about that soon, but how many years have you been practicing?
I have been practicing matrimonial and family law for 15 years. 15
years. So would it be safe to say that you've helped hundreds of people in that span of time?
Yes.
So with that said then, Cheryl, when you think back to all of those people who you've helped, what's most important to you on a personal level about being able to help those clients to achieve their desired outcomes?
Well, I feel that people are coming because they are in need. They need advice. They need help. They want to get out of the position they're in or were put in or chose to be in, but they need the help to stop. A very interesting little phrase that I tell everybody is that they have a hard time getting over that this is the change of their life, and they don't want it. So my little antidote that I tell is, we love to read. There are a lot of books in the library, and we all read books. This is in the days before digital, and we all read books. Mm-hmm. And we enjoy our book, and we love the good parts and the bad parts, and we enjoy, and we cry and laugh throughout the whole book. And when the book is done, we close the book and put it on the shelf. And we don't generally never go back to that book, but there's an entire library out there of new adventures and new books to read and new steps of life. And I find telling that story to people is very helpful. People actually get it after I tell them that little story.
So let's spend a brief moment talking about your background, and especially your formal education and your experience as it relates to the topic of matrimonial and family law.
All right. Well, my background is very interesting. I was a divorced person myself, so I have lived through all of this. I've lived through a divorce. I've lived through a trial. I've lived through issues about the children, issues about enforcement issues as far as support. So I've lived through the whole thing myself. My background is I went to Adelphi University, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education. So I was a teacher for a short period of time. Then I took a hiatus to raise my children. Then after my divorce, I realized I had to go to work, even though I didn't think I was ever going to have to go back to work again. But being divorced, which is very common, which is what I see constantly, is life changes. So I went back to work. And I then went to work in the garment center and eventually opened up my own button business in the garment center, where I did that for many years. At that point, there came a time where I had to go back to court because I was having issues with my ex-husband at the time. And we went back to court, and it took 3 years and a full trial and a lot of money. And at that point, during that time, I said, because I was helping my attorney to try to keep the price down, I was helping her myself with documents and reviewing things. And I said, you know what, I could do this myself. So I ended up, after that case, going to law school. And I went to law school, and I became a family law matrimonial attorney because I had the background of it all. And that's where I started. And I saw firsthand that going to court was not the right way, going to trial, because after my 3-day trial and a full decision from a court, the decision was not correct. And it should have been appealed, and I did not want to spend any more money at that time on the legal system. So I just ended up walking away from it. So I saw what happens. And I then wanted to help people myself, because I knew personally all about this. And that is what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us, Cheryl. That's a great backstory based on your own personal experiences. And I love the way how you turned somewhat of a negative situation into a positive, where you've invested time, energy, money to get yourself qualified as a matrimonial family law attorney, and now you're able to sit on the other side of the table and help people who are in the same or similar situations to yourself. So thanks for sharing that. That's a great story.
You're very welcome.
So, Cheryl, when you think about those people who are out there and they're seeking counsel, they come to you for your help and they're wanting to dig a little bit deeper into the topic of planning for divorce and avoiding pitfalls, what final thoughts would you like to share with them before we close out with our last question for today?
Well, I guess the big thing that I would like, as I said before, is lose the anger. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the future. Get through. Walk through the circle of fire and get it done. Think with your heads, not with your hearts. Make sure you keep your eye on the ball. Be careful that the children do not get scarred here. Don't badmouth the other parent to the children. Be a good parent. Put them first. Realize that all of this anger and all of this hatred and all of this fighting is not good for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best advice I can give.
And it is sound advice, Cheryl, so thanks for sharing that. So if this is somebody who does want to know more about planning for divorce, exploring their options and avoiding pitfalls, what's the easiest way for them to contact you, Cheryl?
Well, my phone number, and I'm in Garden City, which for people who know, it's in Long Island, New York. My phone number is 516-203-7644. I also have a website that is very informative, and it has some articles and some blogs. And it is www.mallislaw.com. And you can reach me through the website as well. And I hope that I was able to help some people who were listening.
Well, I am sure after listening to you today that you certainly have planted the seed, if anything, at a minimum, planted the seed in our listeners' minds should they find themselves in that situation where they need your help. Unfortunately, Cheryl, we are out of time. I have a feeling that we've only begun to scratch the surface of the insights that you could have shared with us today. However, we are limited by time. So, ladies and gentlemen, once more, let me just remind you, we have been listening to family law attorney Cheryl Y. Mallis. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Cheryl. You have certainly demonstrated, hands down, that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
You are so welcome, Cheryl. And I'd also like to take a moment to say thank you to you. Yes, you, the listener. Thank you for joining us on this very insightful and informative discussion with one of the leading family law attorneys in the Garden City, New York area today. Again, her name is Cheryl Y. Mallis. Make sure you do check her out. Give her a call. She shared her phone number. Visit her website. It sounds like she has some really good resources on there. Whatever you do decide to do after listening to her today, I'm sure you're going to be in a good place to get started. So that's it, folks. Again, my name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading family law professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.